Welcome to another chapter of the Crown podcast. Today, we are having a very powerful conversation about essence and what that means. And there's no one better to bring on for this chapter than Annabel, also known as Black Cactus. She's a phenomenal musician, brand being. She's toured the world, forming with the likes of Plan B, Paloma Faith, Beenie Man, Stormzy, WizKid, Stevie Wonder. She's been on shows that include Jimmy Fallon, the Graham Norton Show, Friday Night with Jonathan Ross, the Late Show with James Cordon. She's done the Brit Awards, Glastonbury, V Festival. And most recently, she is a member of the Mocalists on the Lateish Show with comedian Mo Gilligan. Anyone who has had the privilege of being in her presence or hearing her music or engaging in conversation with her, you just feel an aura of safety, warmth, and compassion. And so it's just an amazing opportunity to hear her speak today and have this conversation about living in your essence and being your authentic self. Annabel, welcome to the Crown podcast.
Wow. Honored. Steve, thank you so much for having me. Hello to the listeners. Wow.
So I touched on your illustrious career, and anyone would think you're in your 60s with a catalogue and a body of work that is so full and rich with diversity and just greatness. And, you know, you're still very young and you have a youthfulness to you that's very playful. And I know happiness is very important to you, making people around you feel comfortable, laughing, being funny. And I know that's part of your essence. And so as we're speaking about essence today, can you just tell me, what does living in your essence mean to you?
Wow, such a wonderful question. Living in your essence is being still enough to connect with the fiber of your being. It's who you are when you're not trying. It's who you are in your most powerful. It's who you are in the depths of your despair. And it's a beautiful amalgamation of all the seasons of yourself. It's who you are always created to be. It's your superpower. Yeah, it's you. It's the intangible part of you that lives no matter what.
And it's interesting because, you know, the format of the podcast, we do it as chapters because it, you know, is a byproduct of the Crown book or books. And so even in that question, that's the end result, you know, living in your essence. But before you can live in your essence, there are a few stages and steps that have to happen. And, you know, the title of this one is Embracing Your Essence. And so, you know, within society, there are some challenges of that. And there are things that make it quite difficult to do that culturally. And there's a lot of external pressures to be a certain thing. And we have a lot of self-definitions that we adopt over time. And so from your perspective, what do you think some of these issues are, and how hard is it to withstand some of the pressures to be something else other than yourself?
The simplest answer that I can give, which is from my own personal experience, is to continue to go inward. I think it's really important that you allow those that have come before you in your society to be somewhat, not of a reflection, but somewhat of a mirror of sometimes what not to do. But it's always to go back to be in, but not of your surroundings and the voices that are dictating to us subliminally and directly all the time. Is to go back in and check in with yourself. How do I actually feel about this? What direction do I want to move into? It's about doing all of those things. And yeah, I think checking in, because society can be so loud, family can be so loud, influence can be so loud, but it is literally taking that moment to be still. And I had to practice those moments in the eyes of many, many storms. And it's about surrendering to your own voice. So I'd say it's stillness and it's going inward. and speaking and checking in and listening. And sometimes that is instant, and sometimes it takes a little while, but it's getting in the practice of that.
And what do you think the difference is between, embracing your essence, your true essence, compared to conforming to the expectations of others or societal expectations?
One thing I know for sure about conforming is it gets exhausting. You just get to that point where you're like, I can't keep up. If it requires this effort where you feel like you're stepping into someone else, you're stepping into things that don't necessarily have longevity. I feel like there's such a comfortable malleability to being ourselves. And it might be something that takes effort, but there's my belief that there's an inner being of this is going to be good for you. Whereas I think, conforming is exhausting. I think it's exhausting. You literally feel like you are putting on the mask, and not the mask that you put on when you want to go out and, force yourself into joy or force yourself into kind of being present. It's for somebody else. You're doing it for someone else. There isn't really a long-term gain for yourself. It's for other people, and it's exhausting.
This isn't something that's not common. This is, from, childhood, we are kind of nurtured into seeking approval, and approval's not a bad thing. But what happens is we can start to morph ourselves into being different versions of ourselves around different people, which means that we're never really constant anything. And I just wonder, within your own journey as a musician, I know part of the process of creating art is to be inspired by art that's come before you. And so how did you find your own voice after all of the influences that played a role in you falling in love with music in the first place?
Okay, that's a really beautiful question as well. It was listening to my own voice. And I say that I'm somebody, I think, grew up as a chronic people pleaser, which came from survival. I think the first time I ever remember people pleasing and seeing that it meant that I wouldn't be hurt, or there's a false sense of security that you get. You grow out of that. I grew out of that, and I realized that in order to have something authentic, one, I had to create something for the part of me that needed it the most when it wasn't available, and asking myself questions. I talk to myself a lot, and my children know that. And I often say, if you see me talking to myself, I'm having a staff meeting, let me do it. And it's about practicing. It's about practicing your voice in your own space. It's about hearing, what inspired these other human beings, appreciating that, and now saying, okay, let me look at my surroundings. Let me look at my life. What's changed me? What's moved me? What's made me feel really sad? What's excited me? And it's about playing with that and creating a tapestry from that creatively. So my favorite types of artists, I wouldn't even pin it down to a genre, are people that I believe. When I hear them speak or they sing a note and I believe them, I know that they spent the time. I know that they've had to surrender. I know that they've had to go through some dog doo-doo to get to that space. And those are the people that move me the most. And they inspire me to listen to my own voice, to take stock and sit with what I'm going through, what I'm experiencing, and create art from it. And zoom out and create a picture. So that's what inspires me. It's watching human beings be inspired and authentic and present and share that, which encourages me to do the same, to look at my life, to look at what I've experienced, to look at what's changed me, to be present with the seasons of change and create something beautiful from it.
And that's so beautiful. And, one of the themes that I feel and hear throughout what you were saying is that you've had this yearning for authenticity, even in your influences and the people who inspire you. You want them to be believable. You want to believe, you want the truth. I guess you have this quest for the truth, and
Yeah.
then that's influenced you, and I guess resonates with who you want to be as an artist.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so, what are some of the challenges that come with this? Because I know in the entertainment industry, it isn't all real. And sometimes you may be at an event or doing a show or even working with people that are not in it for the same reasons as you. However, you have to still hold on to your values and the things that you believe in. What are some of the common challenges that emerge within the creative space with authenticity?
First of all, is believing that you are worthy of being in the rooms that you're in. Because you see that self-sabotage, self-deprecating voice, that can take you out of some of the most incredible jobs. I remember being in the job and it was a big ask. And initially I'd voiced that I didn't feel adequate. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So all of the ways that I would know of myself to be brilliant and have flair and finesse and vocal prowess, I just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And sometimes I believe in rising to the challenge, but I think that's the first time in my whole career that I tried to be something that I wasn't, and it was literally a flaming car wreck. So self-belief is important because that needs to be the constant when you're in any room, when you're in any writing session, when you're in any show. You have to know that you're worthy of being in that room at that table, that your voice is important. And if you weren't, you wouldn't be in the space. You have to show up artistically and physically like God sent you. You have to do that. You have to remember that as well. Like, you walk in a room like God sent you there on purpose. And I think also it's about allowing yourself again to hear things and not internalize them, and find whatever practice you need, because so many people have got so many different opinions about, there are so many different incredible artists, that we all know of, and someone loves them and someone can't stand them. But what can never be taken away from someone is the essence of who they are. And it's why, whether it's Marilyn Manson, whether it's Beyonce, whether it's Bjork, the cheeky girls, you can tell the people that are being authentic. And I think that, authenticity is forever. It's forever. And you have to, you've got to practice that. You've got to be your own cheerleader in those spaces, because you're dealing with a lot of egos, especially in the music industry, because you've got to sell tickets. And there are people at the forefront who are absolutely okay to be whoever they needs to be in order to get that done. And then there are other people who don't compromise. And both of those spaces are relevant. And I've come to see that we need both of them. We need them for the equilibrium of the turning of the world, even in the microcosm of the music industry. We need those things.
And I think that's such an important point, and it's very translatable outside of the music industry, just general life. We all encounter different people who are at different stages of their journeys, and as much as we speak about not judging other people because you don't know what they're going through or what they've been through, there is also this internal judgment of not feeling as though your authentic self is enough. And that may be because of life experiences or trauma, or even trying to be yourself publicly or at work or within your family, but then not feeling as though that version of you is what everyone else needs.
Right.
And I just kind of wondered, I did introduce you as the person who you love to be around positive energy. You love to be smiling. Yes. You love to be a big kid. And, people can look at your social media and you're extremely, extremely vulnerable and authentic. But people can make assumptions about you that, life is always rosy because you smile, you have this smile. And so I know you've been through some things in your life to get to this place. And so I kind of want to touch on a bit of that, and the premise of that being that we're constantly evolving and becoming the most authentic person that you can be, or the living in your truest essence isn't an end destination. It's it's a journey. And so if you can speak to a bit, I know you are really passionate about mental health, you can speak to a bit about your story and maybe a particular time to you in your life where you noticed that a shift was happening, but in the moment it didn't feel like a shift was happening.
Oh gosh, I mean, the two things that come straight to mind are, my battle with depression. I had clinical depression, and I had no idea because I was raised by, God rest my mother's soul, a psychotherapist who did not believe in depression culturally. Such an oxymoronic place to be. And realizing that I had depression, and also learning to appreciate the darkness, is in the time where I had depression, and I was a mother at the time, that I learned that a certain amount of darkness is needed in order to see the stars. But in order to hit the bottom before I rose to the top of my own mountain, I guess, I had to really accept the depression, the darkness, the chronic sadness, that there was something wrong, and that I needed to really stop struggling. That thing of, I've heard someone recently say, if you keep saying, oh, if you keep keeping it moving, you either deal with it or it deals with you. And I remember the day I realized, and I had a breakdown, and it's so funny because I'd been spiraling for a little while. And then I remember feeling quite fearful of like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually spiraling. This depression is like drowning me. And then I remember it was almost one day a light went on. I thought, I'm not going to be bullied by this thing. I don't know what the thing was at the time. I couldn't make head or tail of it. I just knew that it felt like it was bullying me. And one day I just said, no. So I went on, and this was before people, I guess, came, and social media and mental health had the partnership that they did. And I came on, and at the time I was, this is the beginning of me deciding to relaunch myself as Black Cactus, the artist. I said, listen, if you see me smiling, know that this is also me. I am depressed. I have cried all morning. I can't get out of bed. And all I want to do is stay here and cry. I don't want to leave my house. I don't want to joke about anything. I self-deprecate. There was a whole bunch of things, and I just thought, I'm going to expose this thing. And hopefully if I get enough light on it, it will just shrink. And that was the journey I took. I really, really, that was the most vulnerable publicly I'd ever been, because I was very much so raised to keep your things in the kitchen. You don't share that stuff. But, the visibility made me see that I wasn't the only one. Because depression, even when you're surrounded by love, and I was always surrounded by love, you just feel alone in a crowded room. You just feel alone. And it's an awful thing. And I really had to create this muscle of, I can't even call it fight or flight. It's not that trivial. It's, it was survive. I knew that there was polarity. As if I can feel this down, this sad, this despair, the opposite must exist. I remember one day, and I just thought, I'm going to keep going towards that. And I'm going to crawl towards it. I'm going to cry towards it. I'm just going to go that way, because this bit sucks. And I don't know how long I can do this bit for. So that was my saving grace. And even, my mum recently passed, and learning to, I've always spoken about the essence of everybody. That's something that's a timeless thing after our body is no longer here. I just believe that keeping people alive through talking about them, and honoring them in the way we decide to live, is the way you keep someone's essence. If I can't see somebody, I've got a friend across London and I don't see them, they're not physically here, but energetically they're here. And I believe the same for people transitioning. And, losing the woman that brought me into this world, I'm still navigating that space. And my mum's very much so somebody who believed in being alive and living, because you can be alive and not living. She believed in being alive and living. And I'm navigating this space through, you know, everything that she taught me, like everything. When somebody close to you passes, all that's left is the good, which is, and me and my mum had some really turbulent times, but it's almost like I'm living for her now. Also, through me choosing to live for myself, I'm living through her, because that's what she'd want. If she came back tomorrow and saw that was sad, she'd be like, "What are you doing?" So I want to live through. I want her to live vicariously through my decision to live, and to find what that looks like. And again, I'm stumbling through it. I'm crying through it. I'm staring sometimes aimlessly through it, and I'm laughing through it, and I'm making food through it, and I'm creating through it. And, you know, and again, I'm heading towards life, whatever that looks like. I don't know what it looks like, but I just know it can't, it's the opposite of feeling the loss, the sadness, the stillness, the cold. It's the opposite. So I'm heading towards whatever that is, and I'm working that out in this season.
You know, as I listen to you, I think I can see why people would perceive you as being the strong one. You know, the one who brings the joy, the life of the party. But even how you speak and articulate yourself about the topic of depression and the experience of depression, we've come a long way in the languaging of mental health, and people have a lot more mental health literacy, and I think that's a great thing. But it's still quite surprising to me how detached we are from the reality of depression, and how it often gets thrown into the same box as being sad.
We wish it was the same.
You know, and I never wish it upon anybody, but it's kind of one of those things that if you haven't been through it, you only know sad.
Yeah.
Sad's probably as bad as you can think.
Yeah.
But for someone who hasn't had any experience with depression or how it makes you feel, how would you describe it, you know, that season of your life?
So there's two examples that came to mind. The first one was the brunt of my depression came before the lockdown. And it is literally like being stuck in a prison where there are no walls and it's inside yourself. You're watching the world go by and laugh and joke and have fun, and you can't join them. And you have all the freedom to go and join them, but you don't, because you don't feel like you can. And I remember that feeling, because you're like, but there are no bars around me. I don't have any shackles on. I can walk out of my house today, but I can't. I feel like I cannot move my arms and my legs, and I can't go and laugh with people, and I can't go and tell anyone what I'm going through. So I did the self-work. So by the time the first lockdown hit, I was literally at the tail end of my depression, of the darkest of it. And being in a lockdown where there was a national lockdown, because I had been in my own lockdown within myself, the lockdown didn't affect me. I'd already done it. I'd already done a good 2 years of it. So it's like being in a prison with no walls.
And in that, you mentioned self-work, and you know, that's one of the things where, you know, when you are going through depression, just as you did, you isolated yourself. And so in that isolation, you're forced to confront yourself and see yourself. And, you know, along that journey of self-work, you're not going to always see everything you want to see. And sometimes you're not prepared to see it. And so it's almost like you're forced to have to see all the versions and sides of you. And that can be quite traumatic, right?
Yeah.
But in that, there is also this beauty.
So much.
Where you no longer have to be ashamed. Privately, maybe publicly, you may still have your fears and reservations, but you know that it can't get any worse.
Right.
And I think there's great comfort in that idea or that scenario, in that there's only opportunity to do more of that self-work. And as you start to
Mm.
work through the fog, you start to discover other parts of you that maybe you weren't able to see when everything was happy and bright, and
Yeah.
because of the distractions. And I guess that sometimes the better we are doing in life, the harder it is for us to be self-critical, the harder it is for us to analyze ourselves or even spend time with ourselves,
Yeah.
because we haven't been forced to. And so in a way, it's kind of a very painful um, way of embracing who you are in that moment and growing from it. And so I just want to know from you, you mentioned about your mother transitioning, and you speak so beautifully about her, and you really embody her essence through that. And I just want to know, to you, and with depression, it's not something that, like a cold, it just we've got it
No.
and everything. It's kind of always there, right, in the background. and
Yeah.
and so when something traumatic happens, like the transition of your mother, can you feel that you could enter into that space at any time again?
It's such a funny thing now with grief. I'm experiencing right now what I like to call post-traumatic growth. And it is, I think, what I've learned from depression, that I have been able to deal with grief. What what's helped me is depression. So there's a wall you hit with depression, and you're like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. And that period lasts for however long. And what you do with depression, to me, depression didn't disappear. I learned to turn the volume down. And sometimes, like a faulty remote, this is what happens with grief. Sometimes the volume goes up and you haven't touched any buttons. And it's like, whoa, okay. So you have to let it be loud for a second. And what I've allowed with my grief, which is what I didn't do with my depression, is I allow it to come, knowing that it has to pass through me. And that's where the surrender comes. That's what I'm learning. It's the surrender. It's like, until I've learned to really, really control this remote control, I have to sometimes give myself the space, because sometimes the grief or depression wants to talk to you. And sometimes it's like, I literally have to go, thank you for your concern. I don't need you right now. And sometimes it's like, okay, cool. What am I missing? What have I not done? What do I need to do? And sometimes I just sit with it, knowing that my condition is, and I have boundaries with my depression and my grief. You have to go soon. Because this not being able to function for myself as a being in my lifetime, this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's not right. It's not wrong. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me to be depressed for 2 hours right now. We can do it later, because sometimes I have to defer it. But this whole thing I was doing before, oh no, it's fine. I'm all right. I'm just keeping it moving. That don't work. That did not work for me. I have to turn it up, turn it down. I have to give myself an allowance. Or sometimes I have to defer it until I get in the muscle of, okay, cool, come on. And that's when I give myself my isolation period. I'm not going to answer my phone. I don't want to talk to no one. And then it's like, okay, cool, got it out of my system. Let me go do a little bit of self-care, make myself a smoothie. And then I can really keep it going. Because the truth is, I've been able to see so much beauty about living because I embraced the darkness. And I want to live. I want to be alive. I want to enjoy. I want to discover. I want to be childlike in my discovery of my life and the lives of the people that I choose to have in mind. And I can't do that if I'm depressed all the time. I can't do it. It doesn't work. It's not workable for me. But like I said, it's a space that I have deemed as malleable, and I'm working that out. I'm still working it out. And I give myself permission to work it out.
As are a lot of people. And I think one of the struggles are a lot of people don't know what to do when they're in that space. And so it's hard for them to even consider what it means to live authentically when they don't even know who they are, because they're experiencing all of these emotions, and maybe for the first time. And you touched on grief. When you go through grief or bereavement for the first time, your mind experiences something that it's never experienced before, and that's
Literally.
the phenomenon of never ever again. And
Yeah.
it's just it just seems so big and so large, and you cannot quantify it because you've never had to before. But in that moment, you're forced to embrace the never ever again. And I just wonder what some of the things that you've done along your journey. You speak about this self work, and how do you find the balance between working on yourself without being judgmental and being kind to yourself? You always tell me to be kind to myself. Steve, how are you
Yes.
being kind to yourself today?
Yeah.
Like, what's the balance and how do you navigate it? Is it, okay, there's a season where I know I'm going to have a lot of self-doubts and I'm going to have a lot of judgment, and then is there a season for the work, or do they happen together at the same time?
Oh, man. I just learned life is not linear, and the only constant thing you can do is practice your inner voice, the one that no one hears. And I think, as unpredictable as life is, because especially with things like death or loss or just even falling out of friendships, you know, that we can be as devastating, ending relationships equally as devastating. You have to practice your voice. You have to practice encouraging yourself and telling yourself it's okay, because the world, and sometimes the ones closest to us, sometimes don't have the capacity to tell us. So if the only place we're getting it is from ourselves, why would we take the option to add to the fire that is coming from the outside? It's so important that you practice and get used to, it's okay, you did really well, because we're human beings. How many times do we have the capacity to go out and affirm every single person we see in the street? We just don't have that time. We don't have that foresight all the time. But for the voice that we have from the moment we wake up, that's in our subconscious, it behooves every single person to practice saying, it's okay, you've got this, you can do this, I believe in you, keep going. Because it's the one voice we know truly cares about us. So it behooves you to train that one voice that you have to have your back, to tell you that you can do it, because you can. And even if you can't do it today, that voice will understand. I know you can't feel like you can't do it today, but practice, you know, incrementally. Can we go again in 5 minutes? Okay, tomorrow. You know, and grief has taught me, you know, everyone says, you know, that saying, wake up and practice each day. My mum was in the hospital. She had a bleed on the brain. And I experienced tangibly having to live, not even hour to hour, 5 minutes to 5 minutes. If I go to the toilet and I come back, is she still going to be here? And then that 5 minutes became, okay, what we doing? Drink some water. It's going to be okay. Whatever's going to be, it's going to be okay. I got you. I had to have that voice. So it's important for us all to train the one voice that has our back to be set, just like Siri, to have our back. We have to. And we have to be real with ourselves. We don't have the luxury of waiting. Like I say, I am married to the love of my life, but I know now from experiencing loss, I don't have the luxury of knowing that one day someone's not going to turn around and say something awful to me. And having that power that of somebody else saying something to me and now it crushing me. I need to know as a base that I have got my own back so that I can pour into others, which is something I love to do.
And I want to touch on that. So it's like, you know, that's what I think is quite fascinating about your journey, in that you do a lot of this self-work, but you don't talk about it. You don't talk about yourself. You don't boast, because most of the time people see you out and about. It's always about how you can make others feel better and how you can empower other people. And so, as passionate as you sound about doing that work for yourself, you're just as passionate about helping other people to experience that and journey that for themselves. And I just want to know, where did this start for you, that when you first felt compelled to want to be a giver, someone who leaves something, imparts something?
Do you know what? The first time I ever felt that, I think I was about 6. And I remember I was in primary school and we were learning a maths equation. And I remember looking around and all my friends were stressed, like, how do we do this? And I was like, right, if I can figure this out for myself, really and truly, then I can tell them. Otherwise, I'm just giving them cotton wool and that's not going to help them. So I remember thinking, okay, like I remember being present with the responsibility of like, no, I have to know what I'm doing because I'm leading people astray otherwise. And what was very cute about it is I got the maths equation so wrong that the whole energy of like, look, I figured it out and I think I know this. I'm going to show you how I did it. And then you try and do it. And if even if that doesn't work for you, let's try and figure out how you can get to the answer. And that light that went on from me turning around and saying, I've got a way that you can have and see if you can use it. And then having a mum who was like so positive, and then being surrounded by, I don't know, everyone, I believe that, you know, the creator, if you know, who, whatever it is that put us together being here, whatever that means to anyone, everyone's got this beautiful, thick essence about themselves that's unique to them, that the world needs, whether you know it or not. And I'm talking to anyone who's listening, whether you know it or not, there's something about you that you might not even know yet that the world needs in order to keep going. It might be your smile, it might be your art, it might be your writing, but they need that, and they need for you to nurture it. And they might not even have the language to tell you. And I recognize that about myself. And it's something I actually take pleasure in. If I do this work for myself, I get to fill my cup and enjoy what that is, and then give the overflow to others.
And that really speaks to connection, which is something else I know is very, very important to you. And so not just connection with yourself, but as a, you know, byproduct with other people as well. And so can you touch a bit about on how, can you touch a bit on how you cultivate these connections within your life to ensure that you stay your authentic self and remain true to your essence?
Wow. I think the one thing that I've learned is that I have a choice. Because I think when we're being formed in our formative years, there's this performance element that we sometimes get. It's like, oh, I have to show up here and be. I have to be funny. I have to be witty. I have to. And then as you know, you get older, you realize, no, I've got real stuff going on in my life and I don't have time to perform. And, you know, and realizing that the choice that I'm making for the people I'm choosing to be in my life, reciprocity is a deal breaker right now for me. I need reciprocity because I am happy to pour in, but there's going to be times where I just need a little boost. I need someone to remind me of who I am. And it's through the people I choose to have in my life, so that I'm not just pouring into people who are going to talk about me behind my back, or, you know, or you know, there's times in people's lives where they feel edified by seeing somebody else downtrodden. There's something in them that reminds them, oh, my life's not that bad because that person's going through it. And I don't have those people. I have those people who genuinely want me to win, who genuinely remind me of who I am when I don't see it. So it's that, and it's practicing boundaries. I did not grow up with any boundaries. And it's a dangerous place to be. It's an exposing place to be. So it's about having boundaries as well, practicing my choice, and reminding myself and reminding the people around me, giving them permission to tell me that I am enough.
Okay, so let's speak a bit about relationships. These relationships, they could be friendships, it could be a spouse. You are also the co-founder of the Spood Estate, which is phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal. I will put the links in the description so everyone can check you guys out. And that's you know, a movement that you and your husband have curated together. And so just want to talk a bit about how authenticity shows up in a relationship setting. And again, that could be friendship, it could be anything, just it could be your child or parent. How important is authenticity within a relationship domain?
It's everything. you know, at the Spoon Estate, which is the company I have with my husband, we're intimacy alchemists, and we empower people to transform their relationship into a sacred union in 30 days using a program that we've created called the Sacred Union Secrets. And that was from a space where we've been together for 2 decades, 20 years. 10 years into our relationship, we were going to break up. It was not fun. We loved each other. We did not like each other. And we had one of the most authentic conversations we've ever had. I don't like this about myself. I don't like this about you. I want to be able to do this. And to be able to sit and hear somebody who loves you and doesn't like you say these things, I had a choice. I had a choice to make it mean that they are the most awful person in the entire world. And this is the nail in the coffin. Or what can we do with this? I have this same framework with my friendships where I need to know who you are. I need to know how you feel about how I am and vice versa. Because I need to know who I'm sat with when I need to be weak, when I need to be strong. I need to know that along this life journey, if we're really doing this, you know, the people I have in my life now are the people who are going to meet my grandchildren. So I need to know who you are. And that means we need to ask questions, and we need to be able to share, and we need to be able to listen, and we need to be committed to each other's personal growth. So there's a lot of questions that I always ask. There's a lot of listening. I've had to learn to shut up when people are talking so I can actually hear them. I've also had to learn to hold space, to be able to speak my truth. And the ones that stick, and the ones that don't, maybe, you know, I've learned that things are seasonal. Sometimes people are seasonal in my life. Like maybe they're here for this season, or maybe they were there for this season, never to return again. You know, I've had friendships, you know, my best friends, I met them and I was just like, we did not gel. And now it's like, the bromance is real. Like the women and the men in my life are like, I am, you know, a version of in love with them, because it's like, we've now gravitated to each other in the right season. So it's also honoring the seasons where people come in and out, and something else, you know, whenever we go through things, there's a different version of ourselves that has been created, and we have to give room for that person to step into the spotlight of that season.
So far, we've journeyed from you as an artist in that world and holding on to your authenticity and living in your truest essence, living authentically. And then we've gone on to that same person when they're going through something, holding on to their authenticity and living in their truest essence, and working through the grief and working through the depression and learning more about yourself, to how now that authenticity can show up in your relationships and your friendships and in the wider world as a parent, as a mother and a wife. But ultimately, when you come back to the end of each day, it's just you again. So we pull back on that word embrace. And so considering all of the listeners right now who have a very similar journey throughout their days, they may not be performing on stages like you, but they work hard and they do the things that they do, whether it's a student or a nurse or whatever someone does in their lives. At the end of the day, you lay your head on that pillow, and the word embrace to me is so gentle. It's so affectionate and it's so warm and loving, and to embrace your essence. And so I just wonder, could you touch a bit on that, you know, the returning back to the base? You switched off the world. What does that space look like for you? I know you live very holistically. What are some of the things that you practice, some of the things that keep you in your essence?
You touched on the holistic living. I mean, I grew up eating everything. I'm West African, and I grew up eating all of the meat on the meat on the meat. I noticed an energetic change. You couldn't have paid me to stop eating meat then. And going vegan for 10 years really changed the way I thought. You know, my skin, my face looked like the side of a pavement. And as soon as I stopped eating meat, this skin came, which was amazing. I journal when I can. Um, you know what I do at every single, I try to do every night, embrace the imperfections. I don't count that, oh, you did it, you did it, you did it. I was like, oh, you did it then. That's enough. And it is embracing. I'm like, nobody else is going to see how much I try more than me. Nobody sees how much I want to live more than me. And the fact that I energetically can see myself, I have to acknowledge myself for that every night. I said, you know what? Well done. I practice being kind. And it's hard. In the beginning, it was so hard because the end of the day looked like you didn't do it again. You missed the mark. You did. And I thought, I look at what I have done. I know what I haven't done, but I look at what I have done and I see it as a penny in a jar. And one more thing I add, and before I know it, I've got £1 and then £3 and then £6. I add for every time I say, you know what, well done for that. Well done for that. I see you. I do that every single night. And then in the morning, I have 5 minutes where I do not look at my phone. I do not belong to anyone else but me. Because I'm a mother, a wife, a friend, a business owner. I belong to a lot of people throughout the day. But that first 5 minutes of the start of the day and at the end of the day, I belong to me, in deed, in action, in thought. I belong to myself. And those 5 minutes over the course of the rest of my life add up because I wasn't doing that. And those 5-10 minutes, as it is per day, didn't exist. But belong to yourself for 5 minutes at least every single day. And in that 5 minutes, see yourself, affirm yourself, and encourage yourself.
I'm going to ask you a question that I know you will love to answer because, again, you're so passionate about other people seeing that this is a reality that they too can live, that they too can see some light in the middle of their darkness, that they can actually embrace the dark parts of themselves without feeling bad about it. And so I guess my question, we're going to round this conversation up today, but you've got someone right now who may be listening and they may feel really inspired by you, or they may feel like, man, it's easy for her to do. She's an entertainer and she's talented and she's got her life together. She's got her family. But deep down, they want what you have. They want to be able to speak so boldly. They want to be able to honestly speak that they well done. They want to be able to say that with authenticity. And maybe they're struggling with their mental health. Maybe they have their own traumas and grief that they're dealing with. Where can they begin? You know, you've just mentioned the giving yourself or taking ownership of that 5 minutes. But what other things can they do to cultivate a better life of self-acceptance and embracing their essence and living truly in their authenticity?
First thing that I want you to know is, even if you do not believe it with your head and your heart, I want you to know that you are enough. Your efforts are enough. There's one step, one foot in front of the other. And the life that you want, and I'm not talking about material things, I'm talking about waking up and actually being happy to see the sunlight. That is all possible. Because if you're in the depths of your despair right now and your sadness, the opposite exists for you. Go and get it. Crawl there, cry there, but go and get it. The opposite of where you are exists. It's real. It's real. There is an up, there is a down. There is sadness and there is joy. Go and get it.
You've heard it here first on the Crown podcast. Annabel sharing some beautiful and encouraging words there about living in your essence, embracing it, and staying true to who you are in the most authentic way. I thank you so much for everything you've shared today, sharing your journey, being vulnerable. I'm sure someone will be truly blessed by this, as you know, I've often mentioned that sometimes people in the public space can seem so far away, but it's the relatability that people have with people like you when you are so vulnerable that actually acts as like a beacon of hope that people can cling to, that hey, if she can do it, I can do too. And I believe that, I know that you're passionate about that, and that is a main driving force for you to empower other people, women, young people, to have that hope and aspiration to want better for themselves. So thank you so much for all that you've shared.
Thank you for having me. And again, much love to everyone listening. You have got this. Yeah, you've got this. And just thank you so much, Steve.
Well, that's another chapter concluded. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation and you've taken some notes, and you can gently begin to implement some of the advice, lived advice and experience, and all the wonderful things that Annabel has shared today. And until next time, stay blessed, and I wish you better days.